From the nation's capital, this is the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast with your host, Rob Snowhite.
My name is Rob Snowhite, and this is my podcast. In episode 227, we're going to talk to Ellis King of River Tactical Flies. I met Ellis at the Virginia Fly Fishing and Wine Festival. We decided to have a nice long discussion over Skype about muskie fishing. In this episode, we're going to discuss Ellis's Muskie Obsession, the most amazing 30 seconds of your life you can have when fishing, hollow-type muskie flies. We're going to talk about how to grade and choose bucktail. And finally, we're going to talk about Ellis's tying crew. This episode is brought to you by Korkers. The Korkers brand was born 60 years ago on the treacherous banks of the Rogue River in Oregon. Their original river cleat was handmade out of rubber and spikes. The functional design quickly grew as a favorite among fishermen, and the rest is history. Through the years, Korkers has continued to innovate with purpose, bringing advancements to fishing footwear. Interchangeable soles, boa lacing, and internal drainage are just a few wading boot firsts brought to you by the passionate folks at Korkers. Check out their latest product line at Korkers.com or your local Korkers dealers. Korkers, helping you expand the boundaries of your outdoor adventures. One of the reasons I wear Korkers is that the interchangeable soles allow me to have 3 boots in one. I can swap out rubber with studs, sticky rubber with spikes, or plain old sticky rubber based on the weather, terrain, or if I'm in a boat. Another benefit is I can take off the soles and go into a store with linoleum floors and walk around and not slip. I can also go into stores with hardwood floors and not worrying about damaging them. That's one of the many reasons that I choose Korkers as my go-to wading boot. Now let's talk about muskies with Ellis King. All right, so we have Ellis King. Ellis, where are you checking in with us today?
Man, I'm checking in from Gallipolis, Ohio, right on the Ohio River across from Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
You know, I really liked your acting job in Star is Born. Can we hear you sing Shallow before we start?
Man, I tell you what, you may think I got a pretty epic voice clear until I start belting it, and then it's no gravy.
There you go. So if I'm throwing a dart at the Ohio map, where's that dart going to land in your neighborhood?
It is going to go 2 hours up the river. So, couple 150 miles up the river from Cincinnati, right at the confluence of the Kanawha. About an hour north of or upriver of Huntington, West Virginia.
Okay. Where would that be in relation to Columbus then?
Dead south.
Dead south.
Almost 100% dead south.
Okay. Are you near Cedar Point? Is that down that way?
Dude, Cedar Point's up around Sandusky.
Oh.
That's Erie.
I passed something once going to Cincinnati. Big roller coaster.
That would have been Kings Island.
There you go.
That would have been the other amusement park that Ohio has.
Someone from Ohio was like, "How did he get that wrong? There's only 2 of them."
Yeah, right.
I only go to Columbus, really. All right, so do you have a celebrity look-alike out there that people who haven't seen you online or met you before would picture as we're speaking?
So when I lived in Lexington, Kentucky, and I hate to say this, but a lot of people said that, because I used to bartend and wait tables down there, people said that I looked like Ashton Kutcher. I don't really see it. I can be an idiot, kind of like he was on that 70s show. And there was a time that I had hair kind of like Kelso, so maybe that's where it comes from.
All right. You could say you're his twin brother, but he already has a twin brother.
Right, and I don't want to lay claim to anybody's twin, but right.
There you go. All right. So you grew up where you're living now?
Yeah.
Or how'd you end up there?
When I was 18 months old, I think the whole family came down here, and man, I had the picture perfect childhood I grew up dead on the Ohio River. My front yard was the Ohio River. I had a dock down there. My dad was my best friend. My brother, he and I, we fished and we hunted. We lived the great American lifestyle.
What was your favorite thing to hunt growing up?
I go really hard into a sport until I get bored with it. Going through high school, I was a big traditional bow hunter, and that's still bred pretty deep in me. But I got into bird dogs directly after that, and that kind of conflicted. So I kind of put the stick and the string down and stopped hunting deer, and went more after the dogs or the birds. So, and then here I am commercially tying flies and fishing. So a man's only got time for so many expensive hobbies, and he's got to start trimming them down.
Absolutely. What was your studies like growing up? Were you a good student? Were you always daydreaming of fishing and hunting?
Yeah. So that's why I didn't play a lot of sports past my freshman year, man, because I didn't want to be in the gym all summer, kissing on a coach to get some playing time. And come basketball season, I'd rather be sitting in a tree stand. So I'll say I was a mediocre student. I was really bored with high school. Actually, my last 2 years of high school, I did some part-time classes out here at the local college, just because high school wasn't my scene. And I don't want to sound like I was above high school, but it's just it wasn't my gig.
Did you go to school after high school to continue education?
Yeah, so about a year after I graduated high school, I had an associate's degree in manufacturing. I was a certified welder. I went to the University of Kentucky to study mechanical engineering, and that was a pretty good ride. That was like a year and a half, and I ran out of money. I came back, and I finished up here at the local college, University of Rio Grande, which here in Appalachia, we wanted to take Rio Grande and pronounce it our own way. So that's how it's spelled, and for some reason we call it Rio Grande. And I got a bachelor of science degree in industrial technology, and I've been working, with what paying the bills. I've been in a manufacturing plant ever since.
That's a pretty cool skill to have.
Well,
you can fix things.
I
build things.
I fix things, and analytically, I think about things, and I use that every day in the commercial fly tying thing. Is there's a lot of guys out there that can tie pretty flies, but I'm the guy that breaks it down. I want to know, as far as a costing structure, how much it costs and how much the material is and what's the yield and how much am I going to waste. And that's what I kind of bring to the table that I think a lot of guys that tie flies don't think of that.
Growing up, you said your dad was your mentor. Did he get you into tying flies?
No, he got me into fly fishing and fishing in general. My dad is a modern day like Jeremiah Johnson. He put himself through school working on the railroad and running trap lines, and he's caught, killed, or done just about anything outdoors, and that's what he did. Growing up, he saved money to buy fishing plugs, not records. He didn't care about music. He's an outdoorsy dude, still is. He spends more time shooting shotguns and playing with bird dogs than he does fishing anymore. But he's salt of the earth. If you got to figure out how to survive, he's a pretty good guy to have around, and he's pretty handy with some woodwork.
That's fantastic. When did you start learning to tie flies? Were you using stuff that he was trapping and bringing home? Were you like, you know what, I could use that in a fly that he's got?
No, he'd pretty well laid the trapping down because the fur had just essentially dropped out. It really wasn't frugal to trap anymore unless you just really enjoyed it. What got me tying flies when I was it would have been when I was in Kentucky, so I was 20. That'd been about 15 years ago. When I just, for some reason, because I liked, like I said, I was a traditional bow hunter. I always like to do things like the hard way, and I guess I got a sense of satisfaction. And honestly, if you want to think about it, catching a fish on a fly rod is the most difficult way to catch that fish. And when I was 21, I put the gear down. And I used to fish the Ohio River quite a bit with gear, fishing tournaments. And from 2021 on, I haven't picked up a bait caster or spinning rod since. And about 2 years into that, I started tying flies because I thought it'd save me money, like every other idiot that starts doing it. And it's fun, but that didn't happen. And even back then, when I was learning, I know a lot of guys, and my brother's one of them. And there's a lot of people that I know that'll sit down and they'll tie one pattern, one fly, one pattern, and they'll switch it over and they'll tie something else. I've always been, I'm not going to tie any. If I sat down, I'm tying 6. So I've always had that commercial mentality, and it's always been in my mind, how fast can I tie a quality fly? Always, from the start.
What was the first patterns you started tying?
Oh, like everybody, woolly boogers. There was another pattern I fished a lot down in Lexington, which is a mallard minnow, which is just, it's a long shank streamer hook, cone or a bead head, and just 2 mallard flank with kind of a red center section and a couple pieces of fly shaboo off the back.
Is that a local fly?
Pattern. Huh?
Local pattern?
I don't know whether it's local, Rob,
I've
because
never heard it.
they were in the fly bins, and that's what I caught a lot of smallmouth. There's a little creek down there around Georgetown, Kentucky called Elkhorn Creek. I used to destroy smallmouth on those and woolly boogers. That was essentially all I fished.
Now, the one guy who lives on that lake that fishes, you just blew up his spot. He's like, great, now I'm going to have a truck.
Well, it's landlocked with private property. Anyway,
okay.
And I don't live there anymore.
You don't care. There's probably more than one lake named that anyway.
Well, it was a creek, and I think it's like 80-some miles long.
Ooh.
I don't think I hole burn anybody, because you got to kind of know where you're going to get around down there.
All of a sudden, 2 cars show up, and the neighbors are like, "What's going on? It's getting crowded
and then
here."
When they hear this podcast, they'll be like, "Is that guy Rob and Ellis? They hole dumped us, man."
Mm-hmm. All right, so when you started tying, were muskies in your frame of mind at the point that you were tying musky flies and you were chasing them, or had you not discovered them yet on the fly?
So when I started tying, I hadn't really discovered them. It was more for the mountain streams in West Virginia, farm ponds, and just any of the other small streams that we have around here. It wasn't until, I'll say, probably 10 years ago. There's some tributaries around where my dad grew up, and they, him and my uncle always would tell me there's muskie in there. And man, I'm telling you, the creek is, in some spots, we're 50 miles from the Ohio River, and it's just a small mud bank, piled up logs. And I just didn't believe it. And finally, you start seeing enough videos and hearing of people catching muskie on fly rod, we started playing around with it. And we didn't have a clue what we were doing. My first muskie rod was an old Orvis Trident 9-weight, had a floating line. I thought that a 1X abrasion resistance leader would do it, and I was fishing EP flies. And my first encounter was a fish that, looking back, was probably 40 inches, snapped me off. And ever since then, it's just been this driving obsession with me.
You can still close your eyes and picture that whole moment, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I know exactly where it was at. I mean, and that's the cool thing about muskie, man. Just about every experience I've had with them, and I've had a bunch, I can go back and relive them all.
It was like the first time Jerry Garcia shot heroin. It was when you saw your muskie and you broke him off.
I don't know that it's quite that bad, but it's pretty bad. Yeah. And then, so Rob, I'm blessed, and I say blessed, that I was never really into the YouTube video scene of learning how to tie patterns. And this was before social media got huge. So there was a few guys around Columbus, some of the Mad River guys that were doing some musky stuff. And I don't want to ever lay claim to pioneer in anything, because I didn't. It was a collective group of guys here locally that were fishing. and developing essentially the pattern that I sell now. And there's nothing special. It's just several renditions of where we started from and a pattern that's always worked for us. You know, I guess when I say a pattern, you know, a profile and a build that just has always worked for us. And that was one of the reasons I started tying them, because commercially at the time,
there was nothing there.
You couldn't buy a Muskie Fly.
How long was it from that first break off on 1X before you landed your first Muskie?
I think it was probably 3 weeks later.
You must have been busy those 3 weeks, not sleeping much.
No, I mean, yeah, you just had to. It was digging around and doing a little research and figuring out what other guys were doing. Like, I'd never heard of like a heavy shocked hard mono leader. Why would I ever need that? I fished for bass and trout, 60-pound test, stuff like that. And then once we started, and it still took 2 or 3 years for us to understand the rigs we were using and why we were using them, and try to understand the fish. And I still don't think you ever figure them out.
What is it about Muskie that makes you get out of bed every day?
It's the 30 seconds, man. It's the most amazing 30 seconds of your life. They don't fight all that hard. I mean, really, depending on the water temperature, you can get them in the rising water temperature, that 60-degree range. They'll do some tail walking and they'll dive a little bit. It's the 30 seconds. It's the eat. It's that aggression, and the fact that when they come in at your feet, if you're on the bank or right at the boat, they don't care. They are laser focused. Crosshairs are on that fly, and then it's all up to you what you're going to do with it to try to get them to eat.
It's like that dog in the Christmas Vacation. That big dog chasing
the squirrel. I had no idea. No,
it doesn't care that there's tables and people in the way. Nope. It's only focused on kill.
I've had a 35-inch fish come across my toes on a figure eight because I didn't have any room, and literally half the fish was out of the water because it was that hot.
Someone was just asking me about the figure eight the other day, and I was like, it's never had the occurrence. What does that just keep them entertained when you've got no space left to go?
Yeah, so you're at a retrieve and the fish is on it. You're just extending your retrieve, and you're also, and you listen to enough podcasts and you watch enough people, because there's a lot of guys, that have been doing it and that likely have more scientific ways to explain it than I do. It's just extending your retrieve, and you're putting that dying bait fish squirming around. And I don't necessarily always use a figure eight. Sometimes it's a modified. You're giving that fish a chance to capitalize its predatory, its apex predator nature. And what that fish is going to do, it's going to follow that bait fish until it goes to kick sideways or change directions or change speeds for it to attack.
And their teeth, when they bite, if they're breaking leader, is that because the texture of their teeth, the point of the teeth, or just the size of the fish?
Well, the fish I referred to, that first one I broke off, I mean, that was just the size of the fish. Personally, I've never broke one off, and I use a combo of steel, titanium, and sometimes just shock tippet, depending on where I'm fishing. The small fish usually have the big teeth, the razor sharp teeth, in my experience.
It's been a long time since I've seen one of their mouths either stuffed or pickled. Not pickled to eat though, like pickled for laboratory. Would people eat pickled muskie? People
say they're really good to eat. I wouldn't know, but.
And do you spell it M-U-S-K-I-E or M-U-S-K-Y?
I get lazy. I do the Y. I mean, the correct spelling is I-E.
I think that's the way I do it. Have you ever seen one barf up its contents of its stomach, or ever seen like one of them dies and you guys just get curious to see what's in there?
No, I've never seen that. I've seen them. So if you can fish when the water's clear enough and you can see a big spool of like suckers when you're drifting down, you just gotta wait. because one's coming. Usually, if you can see you see a big school of suckers in the winter or the fall, there'll be a fish following them very, very shortly. I've seen a few of them do headstands on bait fish, almost look like a tailing carp. I've seen some wild stuff. I've seen them spawn. That's one of the coolest experiences that I've ever had, to watch, 48-inch female and a 32-inch male, just do what nature wants them to do 20 feet away from me.
Can't say I've ever seen that. I just don't have muskies around where there's a lake down the street, but I haven't dedicated the time to go learn it. So yeah, I've never seen anything like that.
And that's what's kind of cool. I mean, where we're located is not really known as musky country, and I don't know that it is in comparison to our northern counterparts. There's a lot of wild, naturally reproductive fish in the Ohio River tributaries.
So you said you were 50 miles upriver, and are they native to the Ohio River, and then they just swim up all these tribs and then become residents?
The location I was talking about, there are some resident fish, and then they migrate all the way up through there. And I don't know that they're coming all the way from the Ohio. So that stream I'm talking about is a 4th tier tributary to the Ohio. So you got a long ways to go, but
it's amazing, man. Like, they'll catch American shad all the way at the top of the Delaware. It's amazing how far fish will go when they're moving.
It's wild. And how all of a sudden, like one spot, it's kind of like steelhead. It'll be essentially, you'll get a stream that's dead or you don't see anything. Then all of a sudden, when they come in to do their work, there's fish everywhere.
That's like carp spawning. You go to a place time after time and nothing. Then that one day you go there and it's getting it on. So let's talk about those waters. The pictures you were showing at the Virginia show, we went over them. They were some pretty narrow bodies of water.
Yeah, and I guess for our conversation, I'll keep it to locally, what I'll call the home waters. And it's the Ohio Canal River Basin and all the tributaries. And when I say that doesn't sound like much, but for instance, Raccoon Creek, which is in my backyard, is 99 miles long, and it's got 2 branches, and that's just one trib. And it's got several feeder streams to it that fish, and not necessarily for muskie, but for bass and carp and for everything else. Any
low head dams on that, or is it all free flowing?
There is, let me think. Yeah, so Raccoon's got one old low head dam. And other than that, it's when we say free flowing, that's one thing in my area. Everything's pretty low gradient. So that's not necessarily a good thing, because when it rains and everything gets up, it stays up. It doesn't clean out real quick.
And these bodies of water, what are you looking for? What's a muskie gonna like? So the particular speed of water, depth, temperature. When you were first looking for these fish, what were you narrowing down as their habitat?
You're gonna target them the same way you would, a brown trout or a smallmouth. They're predators, and in these smaller streams, they're just easier to isolate in these small streams, because when you get to a big pool of water with depth and volume, and then put a little structure to that, it gives them hiding places, and it gives them a multitude of gradient for different water temperatures just because of the depth. And that's what you're doing. You're hole hopping. So I'm looking constantly for undercut banks. Timber is primarily what I cast to. And on occasions, you'll get a riprap or a rock bank. And, you fish them all. You can never fit. I've never been able to pattern these fish enough to be able to say, yeah, don't cast over there. Other than it's 6 inches of water and you can physically look over there and can't see them. If they're holed up under a log doing their hunt, all you got to do is continue to present a fly to get their attention.
How many flies would you swing or strip, or I guess you could explain it, how many presentations will you give in a spot before you would move on?
So if I'm dissecting, for instance, a log jam that is 90 degrees for me, I'm going to make sure that if there's a fish underneath it looking forward, that they've got the opportunity to see it before I leave. And sometimes that's 1 cast, sometimes that's 5 casts, sometimes it's 15 casts. And the telltale is if you're in a boat, which is ideal, is if you can draw them out and get them into the figure 8. Because a lot of times, if you don't put them in a figure 8, they're not there. So if they haven't followed out from underneath that structure, then they're not there, and they're maybe on the backside. So that's a hard question, and it's very situational. So I worked one down Sycamore. There was a picture hanging up, I think, in the booth where I was in a kayak. I was anchored up, and I'd probably made 15 casts before that fish finally came up and T-boned that fly. So sometimes they're really aggressive, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes you almost gotta. And that's where the fly design comes into it. They gotta feel it, they gotta see it, they gotta want it, and they gotta eat it.
Do you find a difference between, like I said, regular muskie and hybrid muskie?
I've never caught a hybrid, so
you're all wild reproducing.
All these are wild, native strain muskie, stream-born.
That's fantastic. What's the biggest one you've caught?
The biggest one I caught, and I didn't physically put a tape on it. I did lay the rod down to get a measurement because I knew it was my personal best, and I was by myself. And the best I can get is 46 to 48.
What about the smallest?
Probably 28. Once they get under 30, 35, I don't measure them. They're just small.
You ever get just a total freak show that's like bent in half or missing?
We had one. Levi and I have caught one-eyed Willie 3 times. It's a one-eyed fish.
You getting him on his blind side or his good side?
Well, he's dumb, so he will come. He came and knocked a fly out of the water, and there's a video of that somewhere out on social media. But he's just massively aggressive, and like I said, we've caught him 3 times.
Maybe when you got a disability like that, his one eye's down, so his other senses are more prevalent.
He's hungry, I know that.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go into your flies now. Well, let's talk about, do you want to talk gear first, or so I want to spend some time on the flies. What do you want to get into first? What's a good?
So are we going to stay primarily on the musky side?
Yeah. Is that where you want to go?
Oh, buddy, I can go wherever you want.
Yeah. We've never had a musky talk before. We'll talk about other stuff later.
Okay.
All right. So rods and gear, or your fly? Where do you want to go?
We could go with gear.
All right. So what are you throwing for these fish?
So 10 weight minimum. I don't go bigger than 11. So 10, 11 weight. Fish intermediate lines. I fish full sinking, usually 6 to 8 inches per second. I'll spend $100 on a line, and I'll cut the welded loop off of it first thing.
What's your method so you nail knot? Do you use monofilament?
I'll use what Rio makes, what they call the heavy shock. And I'll use probably a 14-inch section of that in 30 or 40 pound, which is kind of useless because when you get hung up and you finally got to break it off, you're gonna slip the nail knot anyway. So you could use whatever you wanted. 40 is usually a pretty good mid range. And then from that, if I'm wade fishing, this sounds terrible, I'll fish 80 pound heavy shock.
That's what Mad River Outfitters sold me. I'm like, I don't know how to tie a knot with this.
It's good stuff, man. And yeah, you better wear gloves because you're going to cut yourself.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I just stared at it and was like, oh, I have this now. And I don't think I ever used it.
Yeah, you got to do. So I tie them in blood knots, or I use a lot of the store-bought 18-inch titanium 75-pound snap swivel leaders if I'm in the boat. And the only problem with those leaders is it does take a little of the action away from the fly. But on the same token, I kind of like how it works the fly and drags it down before the sink tip catches up to it.
And they're not biting through that.
No.
And the boat, is it just a different angle that you're pulling them in that you want to use that versus... I don't think I've ever heard of anybody really fishing for muskie on foot. I mean, I've tried to do it in Ohio.
It's
you don't
rough,
hear that
man.
too often.
Most of the streams are pretty steep mud bank. They're hard to get to. I'm fortunate that I have for the past several years, and it's actually distant relation to me. I've got a pretty sweet private access to a place, and it's been a blessing. I can get there after work, and I can watch the fish spawn. I can watch them push up. I can fish for them a little bit before. I never mess with them while they're actively spawning. But it's a pretty easy wade as far as wade fishing for muskie goes. It's not a cakewalk. It's not easy. There's a lot of down timber and there's a lot of lost flies. I've put a lot of Gamakatsu hooks on that creek bank and never got them back.
What gear, you don't have to name names, has not worked for you? Anything that's just completely blown up or failed in your attempts to master muskie?
I won't say failed. There's stuff that I don't like. So the one thing about muskie fishing is like, from a reel standpoint, you can use anything. It doesn't matter, because I mean I always put fish on a reel just because they're easier to manage. But I mean, they're not going to spool you out to the backing, so you don't need like a massive drag. And the rod is what it is. $200 rod, a $700 rod. The only thing that from a terminal gear, I don't like the knottable wire, and I know a lot of guys love it, but it's just not for me. I don't like it. But no, I've never had any terminal gear that I could say, yeah, I'll never use this.
Okay.
But one tool that, and this gets controversial too with the muskie guys. I fish a lot alone, and I use a boga grip, and there's a lot of people that hate hard on a boga grip. And for me, I think it's like any tool. If you use it correctly, you won't hurt the fish, and you'll actually help the fish. But a lot of guys don't, and I can see the damage. If you don't pick the fish up and let the boga support all its weight, yeah, that's bad for them. I use them because I'm by myself, and it gives me a way to control the fish, keep it in the water, get it unhooked. For instance, that personal best that I caught, if it wasn't for that boga grip, and Lord knows what would have happened with that fish, me trying to get it. Because you can't carry a big net with you on these small streams. But yeah, I was able to keep the fish in the water, pop the hook, take a couple pictures of it, and I got that fish actually was on video. It's on my YouTube channel, which I haven't really updated in a couple of years. But boga grips, in my mind, one of the, if a guy's going to do it solo, and by all means, they could get a hold of me if they got any questions. But it's a good tool. It's worth the investment.
I've got the generic ones, and they're kind of garbage. You get what you pay for.
It's true.
Yeah, man. All right, so before we move on to what else you do, we're going to finish up with muskie. What's it about your muskie flies that sets them apart from other muskie flies? And if you want, can you break down like the steps and what goes into it? Like if you're close your eyes and describe how you tie it and what goes into it that makes it so unique to what you've developed over the years.
Well, if I did that, Rob, I wouldn't sell any.
We can bleep it out.
No, man. So my flies, this is what I've learned over the last several years, and I'm friends with a lot of these guys now. There's so many really, really, really talented tires generally in the commercial game that are doing this out of their basements, and some of them are doing it full time. And I will openly admit, because I'm humble enough, there's a lot of them that are better than me. My pattern and the reason that it is what it is today is 23 pretty phenomenal colors for us in our experience that are they're bulletproof. They shed water, and that's how I designed them. That's how I tie them. And the guys that tie them for me now, they've been trained the same way. I've taught them exactly how I started tying the first one that I sold. And there's a few techniques in between the turns of bucktail that I think make a difference. Do they? I don't know. They're nothing special, and they're nothing that I would, I'm not going to get upset if somebody else starts selling them tomorrow and calling them something else, because they are a few turns of bucktail, some synthetic fiber as a tailing material, and flash, and a flyman fish skull on the front of them. It's what's in between that I think makes them special and makes them river tactical flies. And the finish work on the heads, every single fly that I ship out, I have touched and I've painted and I finish, whether I physically tied the fly or not.
What are you looking for in good bucktail?
Oh, bucktail is the musky tires crack. There's so many variables to bucktail, and I think that really, a tire that can handle different material qualities and still make a quality fly, I think it is really what makes someone stand out. Strand length and consistency and how it's going to flare. Those are the three keys. And I used to grade them all. When I get an order of bucktail in, I grade them, and it was a 1 through 5, 5 being the best. And it 5 was the creme of the creme, and that was a low percentage, 20%. You get some fried ones, the real frizzy looking bucktail, and those are really good for clousers and stuff. They don't flare real well for a hollow type musky fly.
So you do buy some sight unseen and then you grade them afterward?
Oh, 100%. I mean, for the volume that we do, there's no way that I could go handpick these.
How many tails are you going through?
I'm sitting here looking at my bucktail rack that I need to order, and I untouched. I probably got 100 bucktails that I haven't even opened a package on, and probably twice that I've cut into. And for this year coming up, because that's diminished, I'll order 400 bucktails.
Now, someone that's never been to your place before, would they walk in and be like, y'all smell something kind of meaty? What is that?
No, they're all pretty cured. When I used to get them from Spirit River, which, man, I wish they were still in business. I love buying bucktail from them. There's some of them were a little ripe. I'm not gonna lie. You'd have to let them dry out. But they were good. That was good quality stuff.
All right.
And I can't complain too much. I get most of mine from Hairline, and usually for the muskies, for the musky side of the game, it's about 60% yield. So, if I order 100 tails from Muskie, I'll get 60 of them that'll make the cut, and the rest of them I'll give to people. I got a box, that's underneath my bench that's probably got another 150 bucktail in them that are just rejects. Those are your clousers. Those are, for anything else you may want to use, something small.
How long did it take you before you figured out what you liked in bucktail?
You tie 500 or 600 of them, and you start realizing, and that's what I was kind of going at before, with being able to adapt to the materials. That's the hardest part. If you get one really good bucktail, you can just rip through flies. It's getting one and then having to, midway through an order or midway through a fly, have to switch to a different consistency, and being able, because it takes, all of them are usable, but they take a little different technique to make them do what you need to do.
How big are your flies for the muskies?
So we have 3 different sizes. The 8/0, which is the longest, is 12 inches. 6/0, 10 inches. And 4/0 is 8 inches. And I just launched what I call the glitter gut, which is a pattern that I've been tying for about 5 years. And Bronson, one of my tires, says, "Man, you got to put these out."
I call him B squared.
B squared. But that's my bridge pattern, man. That's the trout bass musky crossover. But yeah, 3 sizes in the commercially available musky flies that you can find in shops and on the website.
How relieving was it to figure out, I really only need one actual pattern and just vary the colors and tones in it, and it will be the only one I need. When were you confident enough? You're like, you know what? I don't need all the other stuff. I can just go.
And you know what's even worse, Rob, is when I actually go fish. Like, I'll bring all these flies. I'm gonna throw 3 of them. I'll throw 3 flies all day. I don't change that much. It's pretty cool in the confidence of, all right, I think I've got it. I'm confident in the fly. I put enough fish, on the bank. The guys that help me develop it are fishy dudes. And when I say develop it, that's kind of a weak way to describe it. It's just, as a fly tyer, when you tie a fly after you've done it enough, you know that it's fishy, right? Now, once you go put it in the water and if it doesn't swim, that's a different story. But once you put it in the water, you're like, okay, it does what I want it to do. It'll catch a fish. Outside of that, it's more, there's no science to it. It's just personal opinion.
And when was your opinion solidified? Was there at some point you just had a Eureka moment?
Yeah, I think, and I had early on in my musky fly fishing, it was what I'll call the fast track. I think I went like 12 for 12 or something like that. I went from, not knowing what I was doing, catching my first fish, finally figuring it out, buying a real musky rod, and then working on this pattern. And by the time all this happened, when I was fishing the original forcing cones, I think I went 10 for 10. I'm like, well, okay, here we go. And there was a push from my family and some people pretty close to me because they saw it too. For instance, Mad River, which is a great fly shop. Brian and Pat and those guys do a great job. Pat ties a mean musky fly, but go in there and try to buy one. There's none hanging. And at the time there wasn't any really good online options. So I said, I've got the solution. And I was confident in it. And then the flies that I've sent all across the country to catch pike and muskie, I've yet to get a bad review. I've got several guys that have caught 12 toothy critters on them on one fly and they're still fishing it.
It's pretty damn good.
So the proof's in the pudding. And after about 2 years of trying to do this and being in the industry, and again, that's a horrible, dirty word for a sport that we love. That's the confidence builder, man. You get an email from somebody that says, listen, I went to Quebec or wherever they went. I caught 3 muskie and 9 pike on one of your flies. I got it framed because I tried to buy it from him. I'm like, let me buy that back. That's confidence in itself.
Do you ever catch non-targeted fish on these?
I've snagged a gar that I thought was a 50-inch muskie once, and Levi's caught a couple pretty nice bass, and he caught like a 22-inch walleye this last year for his birthday. We floated, but no, I've never personally caught anything other than a muskie. I've had bass follow him up.
Do you ever have
a lot of guys catch walleye and smallmouth?
When you're out guiding, do you ever have muskie chase fish you've caught, or is it different waters?
Well, so I just started the guiding thing this year. So I've never physically guided anybody muskie fishing yet.
What are your guys' guided trips like?
Right now, I've got, I think, 5 different options. One of them is a muskie float. They're just down home. They're just floats that I'm thinking if somebody was coming in town, which nobody will ever come to Gallipolis, Ohio, but if anybody was coming through and wanted to go spend some time with a dude that spent a lot of time on the water, we can go out on the river. We can chase tailing carp because that's kind of my gig. Bass for a couple hours in the morning. Then the sun gets up. Let's go hit the tailors. I got a really nice creek float option for bass.
So there's no famous site in your town that someone's going to come visit, like the world's largest yogurt cup with the sprinkle parade going on?
We are the home to the Mothman.
There you go.
Oh, there is a.
So I had it. That was for me. That was a Boy Meets World reference. But you're the Mothman home.
Well, across the river, Point Pleasant is.
I saw part of that movie. That's Richard
The
Gere.
movie's not that great. All the stories from the acid trip people were the funny ones.
All right. Well, we got the Bunny Man out here. He'll chop you up.
No, but I mean, so the reason that I offered to guide trips is I do all these shows and people are always asking, do I guide? Do I guide? Do I guide? And I was always like, no. And I'm still kind of like, no. But
if it comes along, you're not going to pass it up because
I'm not going to pass it up. And
I'm going to give them
a good experience. And we're nestled along the Ohio River. There's a lot of history here. If somebody wants to make a family trip of it, I can set you up with an itinerary to send your family shopping in the morning. We'll go chase fish. You go have lunch with them, and then in the afternoon we'll go back out.
What's your local cuisine? You got something that no one else has? Yeah,
so we got a really cool place, and I promote it very heavily, and it's really the only place that my wife and I will go eat. It's Colony Club. It's an old historic movie theater that the owners, David and Karen, bought and restored, and it's a cool little bar. They've got fresh, locally sourced food, really good bourbon, really good craft beer if that's your gig, really good local wine, and you can sit and watch old 50s movies playing on the big screen.
That's pretty cool.
It's just a really cool atmosphere.
I wish we had something like that in my neighborhood. Everything's a chain almost.
Yeah, there's literally from a restaurant standpoint, there's Buffalo Wild Wings up on the north side of town, and that's about it. Everything else is local. There's a pretty cool Indian joint. There's a nice sports bar. It gets a little rowdy late, but it's got some good eats. And like I said, there's a lot of history.
Someone's going to call you up.
That's fine. I'd love to take them out.
That's right. So what other flies are you tying when you're not tying up musky flies?
So we expanded our line. We do a little bit of everything. Like I'm sitting here, I'm looking at a half order of Royal Wolves that we just did. So there's 24 Royal Wolves in front of me, and the rest of them are on their way. We do everything. I do a lot of stuff that I'm going to fish here on the river or here locally, and a lot of crossover poppers, streamers that'll work on you know, your local trout stream or your smallmouth stream, because effectively, Rob, they're all eating about the same stuff. You know, an angry brown trout and an angry smallmouth from a streamer perspective they're not going to differentiate. And then I've got a full line of what I'll call staple trout flies, made in the USA by really fishy dudes.
Do you have a pattern that's one of your favorites to tie versus someone orders one and you're like, I'm not in the mood for that. That's going to be complicated.
Yeah, so I actually just turned an order down. Because sometimes that happens, unfortunately. You know, I'll get a request for something, and by the time I'd have to order materials in and do it all, it's just too complicated. It's easier to send it to somebody else. I send a lot of work to Tony Sandroni, Nightmare Muskie Flies, for anybody that wants game changers, just because he's the guy. If you want a game changer, go to him. I like the crawl spaces. That's I don't even know if I can call it my own pattern. It kind of is. I'm sure there's somebody that's tying one that's a monkey butt changer or something. I don't know. That's why I don't stay up with what's going on in the commercial tying field and the names of them. And it's got me in trouble before because, you know, I don't know that somebody else has already come up with that. But the crawl space is kind of one of my go-to patterns.
Yeah, some flies are like songs on a guitar. Our ingredients are the chords. At some point, you're going to come up with the same thing. And that's
right. And
you got like Darwin and Wallace, and you've got that Led Zeppelin, and then that band that they say they stole Stairway to Heaven from, but they never met. So who knows? Yeah.
Like any modern streamer, any modern streamer that you buy in a shop or somebody's commercially tying,
there's some bro behind it.
Honestly, you just look back at a Zonker, look back at a Woolly Booger, and then just about anything Kelly Gallup has developed. And there you go. That is the modern streamer game. and it's some variation of that.
Yeah, I use Russ Madden's Circus Peanut, and then I just kind of add stuff to it here and there as I need it. That's a fantastic fly.
Right. And then, so at what line is it no longer the Circus Peanut?
Yeah, I call it the Potomac Peanut, and then I have him on my website and on my store named as the origin of the pattern. And then I basically just explained how I added stuff on it to make it a little bit my own. Yeah, it's like someone, and a specific person came up with the Reuben sandwich. But you can have a Reuben that's got something else on it. You just call it like a bacon Reuben.
Right. And so we sell a pattern, and to my knowledge, we're the only commercial fly tying company that's technically allowed to sell it. Named this is the Joe Louis only, and it is in no way like Joe Louis's original only. It is a fly that we call the only, that's similar to it, that's been changed for us. And there was a little controversy over it when we first launched it, but I was fishing a pattern for smallmouth very similar to this before the article really came out. I think it was 2012 was the article. It was a rubber-legged woolly booger, and there's not a whole lot of difference in them. But whatever. I mean, but we sell that. That's one of our most effective and hottest selling trout flies.
Can you describe it? Since we can't see it here.
You can't see it. You can see it on the website. It's imagine a really thin body woolly booger tapered up with a wing casing and 4 long legs. Lots of wire. So it looks kind of like a big mayfly or a big stonefly, but it's a hybrid. You can dead drift it, you can twitch it, you can swing it, and we've got fish on it all ways. And I got a carp fly that's almost identical to it. It's just got dumbbell eyes, ride and hook up.
Are there any fly materials that you prefer to tie with over others?
Man, I love bunny. Bunny and deer hair. Yep.
What about materials you don't like? One of the guys in my fishing club sent me a huge article about CDC today. And I'm like, man, I'm tempted to start tying with that, but that's going to lead me down some rabbit holes.
Yeah, you get in CD. Yeah, I do enjoy tying. I got, and I'm sure there's some pattern that I poached this off of. I do a pretty sweet little small mayfly with CDC. I like CDC. Material that I hate, I'm not a big fan of natural peacock, only because it breaks. That's about it. I'm sitting here looking at my materials of what I hate. That's about it. I mean, if I'm doing a streamer and I'm doing like a complex twist or I'm blending stuff, I don't like anything that's got a core that's too bulky. And I run into that a lot trying to develop new stuff. Is the material, the blend looks really good, but then when you physically go to lay it on the hook, it just doesn't work.
And you still have it though, even though you don't like it.
Yeah, it just doesn't lay right.
All right. What about what are you using to tie on? What's your vice of preference?
So I'd use a Wolf Industries Apex and Atlas.
Any other
USA in Indiana.
Any other special tools and gear you like to tie with?
Oh, yeah, I've got a multitude of bobbins. I don't sell anything. I'm a certified loon dealer. I don't sell anything that I don't use. And that new Loon Ergo bobbin, it's pretty slick. I'm not gonna lie. And the Loon Gator grips for dubbing loops, they're legit. 100% on, for the most part, I'm doing Gamakatsu hooks on almost everything I'm doing. The Loon Ergo deer hair scissors, I usually go through a pair of hair scissors about every 8 months. I'm on a year, and they're still cutting clean. So Loon's got a lot of really good products, and I'm really proud to carry them on the website. But other than that, no, man, I'm an innovator. I'm down here using stuff that you probably would never think to tie flies with. And I'm trying to slowly work that into my business plan. I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm trying to develop things that I've used every day that I know that everybody else isn't using, and try to work with some of the people of the industry to get them out to the masses and, help everybody out and maybe get a little passive income. And so I got a couple irons in the fire there.
I can dig that. We got to stay busy what we're doing. Anything else I didn't ask you about? The guiding, your team. You want to talk about the guys besides B Square and your facially hair gifted brother?
Man, he does have an epic beard, doesn't he?
He looks like he's from the 1800s. You put a monocle on him.
You would have never thought that either before he just let that rip. I never saw that coming. But God bless him. Yeah, so let me talk about my crew real quick, because there's a couple levels. So I've got my core group, and my brother's my right hand man, Levi King. He's my bump board. He's the guy that I bounce just about all my business ideas off of at some point. B Squared is another guy. He's one of the few people that still really likes to talk on the phone, and I dig it too. Usually once or so a week, we'll talk for an hour or so, just about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So he ties a lot of the trout stuff. Young gun Seth Harmon, young guy, super talented angler and tire, ties a lot of musky stuff, and ties a lot of the streamers. Luke Arthur from Charleston, and so we're starting to branch off because quite honestly, Rob, those are my core group of dudes. And there's a lot of talent out there, and for what I'm doing in my business, there's a lot of people out there that are really good at tying flies. I like to think I'm really good at selling them, so let me be the middleman. Luke Arthur, Charleston, West Virginia, local guy, real fishy dude. He's going to start picking up some musky volume, and he does. So I sell a really cool green drake spinner called it's kind of like a coffin fly called the Vanilla Volcano. Arthur's Vanilla Volcano. He came up with it. Super killer pattern. And he ties some other stuff, does some custom work. And all the guys I just named, if you hit me with a custom order, there's a chance they're going to touch your flies.
Your brother looks like the dude who'd be behind a soda fountain back in the day serving in Arthur's Vanilla Volcano.
Right on. Yeah. Good look.
But it'd be an ice cream or something.
Right. Float. Root beer float.
There you go.
But anyway, and I got a few things in the works, and I'm not ready to announce yet. But I got another up and coming star that I think I'm going to pick up, and I'm going to get a few patterns off of him. And then I got another deal that I'm trying to work. But my main goal is to offer competitively priced flies made in the United States by really fishy guys, for whatever your need is. Because what I've found in this industry, there's a lot of really good guys that are good at fishing, and they're good at tying flies. They're not necessarily good at running the business. And unfortunately, I think I found that I'm decent at running the business. So when it was the Ellis King show and I was ripping the full volume, I was about to go insane. And I've really come leaps and bounds from a business and personal perspective when I let these guys come in and start tying some flies for me. And I put my name behind all of them.
The Executive. Ellis the Executive.
Dude, I got a fly called the Executive. It was developed during an executive meeting back in the day.
You guys must have fun business meetings.
Oh, we have a good time.
I can imagine. Where can we find all those things online? Where can we find your guys, buy your flies, social media?
Yeah, so the website, rivertacticalflies.com. It's a work in progress constantly. I'm on there every week. We're running a pretty cool sale on some loon stuff and all our apparel. Facebook, River Tactical Flies. Get on there, like us, follow us. Instagram at River Tactical Flies. Like us, follow us. And one thing I'll say, and it's not just for us, it's for if anybody that's listening to this knows somebody that's running a small business that does social media advertisement, get on there and when they post something on, for instance, Facebook, get on there and engage in it. Say something rather than just like it and move on, or share it and move on. That's those adorable little emojis down there that you can do. Get some interactions, because there's a lot of algorithms that Facebook uses that will restrict or release that post based on that. So help all your friends out and help me out if you'd like. But it's just a little PSA.
We'll get those numbers up. All right, I got some more questions for you. You ready?
I'm ready.
Are you related to anyone famous?
Yes.
The Mothman?
No.
Can you say?
I can. So my grandfather, Charles Hamrick, was an All-American in Ohio State. I want to say 47. Died many years ago. I mean, I never met him. And then his would have been father and uncle. So his father was Ellis Hamrick, which I'm named after. And he posed for the statue at the state capitol of West Virginia as the West Virginia Mountaineer.
No way.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I feel like that's about all the fame that I got. Outside of that, there's probably some felons and some stuff that I shouldn't say on the airways, but that's about as deep as my fame pool goes.
All right.
And my brother in his epic ass beard.
What album gets the most rotation?
Album.
Music album.
Music?
Yeah. What do you listen to the most?
Whoa.
Favorite album?
That's digging deep.
If you were on a deserted island and you got one CD?
Probably Black Crowes Southern Music Company.
That's an oldie, but good one. My wife still thinks that they are the ones that wrote their first single was a cover, and my wife still thinks it's theirs. And then it'll come on a Dead song with Pigpen from like '70 here, and she's like, "But I thought the Black Crowes came up with that." Hard to handle.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, and they also covered Marley. Time Will Tell.
I don't know that version of theirs. If you had only one deli meat to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Dude, you gonna give me one? Probably turkey. I'm a turkey dude.
If you had a superhero power to make you a better angler, what would you choose?
Stop time. I like to have more time. Is that a super? Yeah, that's a super. Hell with it. I'm the superhero. I can do whatever I want.
There you go. Favorite Harrison Ford movie?
Indiana Jones.
If you had one species of bird to tie with for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I'm guessing It's not peacock. It's pheasant.
Pheasant.
Do you have any unusual fly tying materials?
That I can talk about? No.
Okay, we'll keep the police out of there. Do you have any ridiculously irrational phobias?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm a neat freak. I'm kind of a OCD control freak. So like my shop goes from a complete disaster to back to order to complete disaster. So my phobia is that everything backs up down here and I can't find anything. If that could be a phobia, I'm really not scared of a whole lot.
Are you terrified of anything that's not a phobia?
No.
What's your favorite candy bar?
Snickers.
When posing with a rod on your shoulder, is that okay or not? let me rephrase that. When is posing with a rod on your shoulder okay?
Never, but I got a funny story about that.
Do it.
So a while back, I mean, when I say a while back, this is probably 5 years ago, back when I was trying to be cool because, to sell flies, you got to be cool, right?
Pro staff.
I caught a muskie on this creek and I GoPro'd it I went and set the GoPro up on the bank, and I had him in the net. It wasn't a very big fish. And I had the rod up on my shoulder, and I was trying to hold the fish up. And the fish flopped and jumped over my head, and I almost fell. The rod went in the mud. The fish fell back in the net, and I got all of it on video, and none of you will ever see it because it is locked deep in the archives. But occasionally, once I've had too many Miller High Lifes here in the basement, I will pull that up, and I will watch it just to laugh at myself.
That's good times. You have
That's karma for me. That's karma for never wanting to put a rod on your shoulder ever.
Do you have a personalized fishing plate?
No.
What would ruin a day on the water for you?
Oh. I don't know that you could ruin a day on the water for me. To get completely drenched and not have, and it's just that uncomfortable cold, like to fall out of a boat and it's 40 degrees and just past the point of hypothermia, but where you're probably going to try to ride it out. That'd probably ruin the day pretty quick.
Oddly enough, I've seen someone poop in their waders.
I have that. I've seen that as well.
And it didn't bother him. And I think that was just his personality.
Didn't bother this person either until later.
When it got cold.
No. When he realized what had all happened when it got hot.
Oh.
Yeah, it was.
Like an ice cream cone?
Yeah. Yeah. It's horrible.
If you had access to a DeLorean with a flux capacitor and could travel to a pre-human destroyed environment to go fishing, what would you choose?
What year?
Any time in history. If you could go back in time before modern humans in the last several hundred years ruined it all.
Yep.
Where would you go?
I'd like to go to the Monongahela National Forest before any of the timber.
All the old growth.
Yeah. I'd like to see what a lot of the rate streams like Shavers Fork where they blasted it. I'd like to see what it looked like when it was full of brook trout. And because you look at some of those pictures of some of those massive fish that they pulled out of there at the turn of the century. I'd like to go back there with no pressure, see what that's all about.
What gear would you fish if you had that choice?
Fly rod.
No, I mean would you like bamboo?
Well, no. No. If I got the choice, I'm not going to use bamboo. But dry fly. I mean, there's nothing sexier than catching a trout on a dry fly. I don't care. And I'm in the streamer game. I sell a lot of streamers. There's nothing sexier than a well-placed dry fly cast and a fish coming up to take it. And I'm the musky guy, right?
Absolutely. Has anyone ever caught a muskie on top water that's not on purpose, like a popping bug maybe? Are there topwater muskies? I guess there's rats.
Oh, yeah. I've got some poppers.
Ducks.
I caught one skimming across the top. And I guess I've probably caught 2 or 3 that way, ripping across the top. Yeah.
What's the best sandwich you've ever had?
Best sandwich. And that's a deep one. Colony Club, that place I was telling you about, their breakfast burger.
So I figured they'd have like snow caps and jujubes and everything there. Like fake butter sauce. It's not, the food's not movie themed?
No, not at all. It's like American Grill, pizza, flatbread.
$5 milkshake? What about hot dogs? You put ketchup or mustard on them?
Both. Oh,
my goodness. All right. What was the strangest thing you've ever seen on the water?
Okay. I'm going to tell you a story real quick. We were musky fishing. It would have been like early summer. This would have been early in our musky game. I was in a canoe by myself. My brother and another friend of mine were in another canoe behind me, and we were fishing. They had already caught 2 fish out of their boat. I had stripped the guides out of one of my rods. So for any of you who don't know what that is, with these sink tip lines, once you get enough sand wrapped around the line, it acts as a chainsaw file, and the guides just fall out. So since the mutual friend had already caught a couple fish, he gives me his rod, which is a custom built 10-weight rod. They pass me. I'm on the bend, anchored up, and I'm throwing this fly, and I feel a thump, 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 and then I can feel it start to move. So immediately I point the rod and I yank and I strip set, and I've hooked probably a 14 or 16 inch in diameter snapping turtle in the bottom of the shell. And I'm back and I got the rod doubled over, and I look down and I realize what it was. The rod snaps, and with all that tension and me in the canoe with no outriggers, I tumble over into the water. And I may or may not have been drinking a little bit that day. And beer cans and me came floating back up to the top. And when I finally got everybody back up there was no snapping turtle, and they didn't believe me. That was probably the wildest ride I've ever had on the water.
I'd be scared being in the water with that thing.
Nah. Anything
else? We pretty much covered everything I want to get out of you, at least on the first podcast.
Man, I tell you what, I've enjoyed it. If it's just kind of like these shows that we do. Let me sit around, listen to reggae music, and talk to people about fishing. That is, and drink a few beers. That's just where I need to be in life. So, no, I appreciate you having me on, and I hope I didn't mumble and stumble too much.
No, man, I'm looking forward to seeing your performance at the Oscars.
Yeah.
Just don't pee yourself on stage.
I may.
You have seen the movie, right?
What movie?
A Star is Born.
Dude, I don't go to the movies. I don't rent movies. I got Netflix.
He's got this, like, he sounds like Sam Elliott in the movie, but like kind of like you. If your voice was dropped down a little bit, you'd sound like him.
If you tell me that I right now, that is one of the greatest. You tell me I sound like Sam Elliott, I'm all right with that.
So the whole thing is Bradley Cooper's voice as the singer is based on Sam Elliott, who plays his brother in the movie.
Right.
I'll send you the song to listen to.
All right. Sounds cool.
RiverTacticalFlies.com.
RiverTacticalFlies.com. If you got any questions. I mean, so honestly, Rob, I help a lot of people when they want. We talked a lot about muskie tonight. If you're interested in getting the muskie game, and I get it, you may not buy anything off me because you tie your own stuff. But granted, I do sell fly tying materials too. Get on there and hit the contact me. Ask me questions. If you don't want to hear all the bantering from the social media pages, I help a lot of people out that I know that I'm probably not going to get an order from, and that's fine because that's why I'm in this industry. Is not necessarily to make money, help people.
Fantastic. I like hearing that. Ellis, it's been a pleasure.
Rob, I appreciate you, brother.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. For more information or to contact Rob, please go to www.robsnowhite.com. This podcast is brought to you by Freestone Productions at freestoneproductions.com.